I bring word from the King of Westmarch.
Has he agreed to send us reinforcements?
My lord says he will send no living men to battle imaginary.
Hi everyone, Space Cowboy here, coming at you with more Diablo Sundays, episode 4. So I've finally come back to it. Yeah, so basically, as I've explained before, this is kind of a stream of consciousness show. I kind of will just kind of run through bits of Diablo as we try and get to adventure mode and kind of talk about what's been on my mind.
We are not alone in here.
Well, yeah, there's been lots of different things in here. Why is he saying that? Oh, it's a boss.
The one who killed Lord Belial. I will savor, tearing the flesh from your bones.
So we're hitting a mid-boss or a boss already. That's fine. Get a lot of loot from this guy. Wonder if they'll do like something weird with the room to make him difficult to kill, because if that's all he is, this is gonna be easy. So yeah, basically just trying to get to adventure mode, because apparently that's where all the cool stuff happens. But yeah,
My hatred is too low.
my week's been kind of weird. I've been pretty ill, and as I said in a previous video, not mentally able to kind of get it together. That's all kind of past now. What really helps, and do you know what's really good if you're feeling down? And you have to be a wrestling fan to appreciate this, but read a book called Have a Nice Day by Mick Foley. It's his autobiography. It is the one book in my entire collection that I've read most. Out of every single book I own, probably the second book that I've read the most is the Death of WCW. But really,
I need more hatred.
I was feeling really bad, and I just picked that book up and started reading, and I knew it all, but it's such a good,
She's not some frail little flower, Cormac.
it's just such a good book to just really go, you know what, this guy, you know, he was never the coolest guy, but he did it. And you think to yourself, you know what, if he can do it, things can't be that bad. And it's an uplifting book. It's got a good message. It's fascinating to read. I mean, the man himself is incredibly funny in the book. He did a follow-up book called Foley is Good, which is a play on the words that like people used to chant Foley is God and have signs up and things, and he never liked that. Because they were chanting Foley is God because of like all the weird stuff he'd done. You know, he'd like fallen off a cage and things like that. So, you know, he didn't like the fact that people were chanting Foley is God because of that. So he preferred Foley is Good. And Foley is Good's okay. It's an okay book. This is Foley's problem. Every chapter in Foley is Good, one is a chapter about wrestling, and the second is a chapter about himself and his charity work and different things. And you're like, okay, fair enough, I accept this.
Over a useless tool.
Oh, we've got more going on here.
Your inevitable destruction. Your walls have grown no stronger. Our assault continues unabated. The stone will still be mine.
Terrifying noises were coming from the armory, so Tyrael went to investigate. He said if you were to return...
Okay, so we're to go to the armory, but I'm gonna sell my loot first, or break it down, I think. So yeah, so you know, Foley's big thing is, he would kind of write, he'd write these books, and because the first one is so good, a lot of people like give him credit and go, well, you know what, he's a good writer. But I read his third book, The Hardcore Diaries, and it was awful. It was awful because he congratulates himself on doing charity work. He talks about all these sick kids that he's met and how grateful they were to meet him, and then he talks about ogling the divas and how they love him, and it's just so stupid. Alright. You know, it's like, he's like talking about how the divas were like coming up to him and hugging him because, you know, he's Mick Foley and they all think he's a cool guy. And meanwhile he's talking about ogling them and staring at their cleavages and stuff, and it kind of soured me on him. So I've not read Countdown to Lockdown or whatever the hell it is and after that, and I think he's wrote some other stuff, but I've never read any of it. But his first book is a work of genius.
I will hunt him down through the crater.
I really, really do believe that, you know, anyone who's a wrestling fan should read it.
Then I should head to the back. At last.
So let's see, this way. So that kind of cheered me up and got me thinking, you know, I was actually a lot better after reading that. Then I picked up the second book I read the most, The Death of WCW. Now, it's a book that, again, if you're a wrestling fan, and I'm going to be honest, if you're not a wrestling fan, you might as well turn this video off just now, because I'm going to talk about wrestling for the rest of this video.
I have secured Bastion's keep.
So let's see what we have to do.
Battle is still waiting for me on the fields, where Asmodan's war machines are closing in.
The final battle? I'm not at the end of the game yet, am I? Anyway, so if you're a wrestling fan and have any desire about how the business works as a business, the wrestling business works as a business, you should read The Death of WCW. And if you can, pick up the 10th anniversary edition, because they make a lot of salient points about, like, they wrote Death of WCW back about 2002, 2003. So TNA were not a thing. TNA Wrestling, Impact Wrestling as it's called now, were not a thing. So they wrote this book and said, right, you know, WWE owns everything. This is where we are. So what happened next is that TNA came about, and TNA Wrestling kind of took the place of WCW. They became the number 2 promotion, but it was never as big as WCW. It never could be. WCW was financed by Ted Turner, who's like a millionaire, so, you know, that's why it never got that big. But, you know, they got some backing, and a lot of people who worked in WCW and never went to the WWE because for many different reasons, maybe didn't want to or wouldn't be hired by them, like Jeff Jarrett. I mean, Vince McMahon will never ever hire Jeff Jarrett. Never ever hire him. If you want to know why, just listen to the Attitude Era podcast. They cover it up. They cover that more than anything. When Jeff Jarrett leaves, it's a long story, but he essentially held them up for money. So anyway, they wrote this book with the assumption that WWE was it and there would never be another second place. TNA came around and everyone thought, actually, and for a while it looked like it could have been a good number 2. It would never ever topple the WWE, but it would be a good, logical second choice if you were tired of WWE and they're tired, you know, Super Cena and all their nonsense that they were doing. You know, this would be a good alternative. Unfortunately, bad booking decisions, bad hiring decisions, bad financing decisions. Like, I mean, it's a miracle TNA is still around now. Never mind, you know, never mind that it got as big as it did for a little while. They made so many mistakes with that company, and that's a part of the 10th anniversary edition of the Death of WCW. They actually have little sections of the book called Lessons Not Learned, and they point out lessons that both WWE and TNA and other wrestling companies have not learned from WCW's demise and what led it to that point. So the Death of WCW is essentially a breakdown of why WCW is no longer a wrestling company alive today. I mean, WCW was backed by a millionaire, and he had a meeting one day when he first purchased WCW. He had a meeting, and one of his yes men said to him, maybe there's this WCW you bought in 1991, well, we're at 1993 now, and it's losing $2 million a year. Maybe we should close it. And Ted Turner, who's the millionaire at the bottom, said in a meeting, if anyone ever brings up closing WCW again, they're fired. Because A, he liked having a wrestling business because he liked sticking it to Vince McMahon. And B, it got him ratings when he needed it. When he was building his TV stations, wrestling got him ratings. Didn't make him any money, got him ratings. And that's what mattered to him. And it helped build his channels become the cornerstone of American TV. Now that's what happened, and that's why it shouldn't have died. WCW should have lived forever. I mean, WCW should still be around now. But this book tells you why it's not around, and actually names the person that killed it. Now, there's pictures in the front of the book. There's Vince Russo, there's Eric Bischoff, there's Scott Hall, there's Kevin Nash, there's Hulk Hogan. Neither of them killed WCW. They played a hand in WCW becoming to use the nicest word I can, the shit show it became in 2000. But they're not the reason WCW is dead. WCW was killed by a Time Warner executive who just didn't like wrestling. And when WCW needed a TV slot to survive, the only thing that would have kept it alive is them having a TV slot on a Time Warner channel. This executive, because Ted Turner had basically his power had been weakened by the Time Warner merger that they went through, this guy just didn't like wrestling. Ted Turner no longer any say in it. He just said, that's it, company's dead, you're not getting a TV show. And it killed them. And that's what killed WCW. But this book was into detail, almost week to week. The birth of the NWO, right through to the Vince Russo, Eric Bischoff era of the New Blood and the Millionaires Club, to the reformation of NWO 2000, to basically the final Nitro, where Shane McMahon turned up and said, I bought WCW, and then you found out that, WWF owned WCW, and all the great matches we were going to have as an invasion didn't happen. And there's a lot of reasons that didn't happen. It was all contracts, but basically they talk in detail about that. They go into detail week to week, and it's fascinating because
I need more hatred to do
a
that.
lot of things just don't make any sense. And one of the main reasons WCW was a terrible thing to book is because, like, writing a wrestling show, a lot of people think it would be easy. You just have to kind of give them reasons, and they have to do this and have to do that. It's probably really hard. You have to think up. You have to make hours and hours of television a week, and you've got to keep the story going. And when you get bored of the story, how do you think your fans feel? And if your fans turn against your ideas, and you've banked hundreds of hours of ahead in your mind. You're like, right, well, this is a storyline that's going to last 6 months, and the fans are like, no, it's not. This is terrible. They don't get behind the guy that you thought was going to be the next big thing, Roman Reigns, for example. The fans just don't get behind this guy, but WWE pinned all their hopes on them, and you could tell a lot on the fly booking had to happen. So, but a big reason that WCW was being booked week to week, and it was literally being written as it went on the air. Sometimes they were having, the guys behind the scenes were hastily writing segments while matches were on. And it's down to one man. And a lot of people might disagree with me. It's down to Hulk Hogan. Now, Hulk Hogan, say what you want about him. He's a racist. He's an egotist. He flat out lies whenever he gets a chance to. When a companion wrestling business that he wasn't in good terms with dies, he's the first person to come out and say, we patched things up before he died. When Macho Man Randy Savage tragically passed away, and Macho Man and Hulk Hogan were never in good terms, after a certain point they just never got in good terms. Hulk Hogan actually came out and said in a public statement, we patched things up before he died. Never did. Never happened. It's a lie. When Ultimate Warrior sadly passed away, again, we patched things up before he died. No, you didn't. You were on the DVD they made called The Self-Destruction Ultimate Warrior, and you were like, he was terrible for business and blah blah blah, and basically calling out, the Ultimate Warrior is the worst thing to happen to the wrestling business. So anyway, this Hulk Hogan, and I hate the man because he was given by Eric Bischoff creative control over his and other. He was given creative control over WCW, for instance. So what he would do is he'd come in and he'd see the show and he'd say to Eric Bischoff, "What's going to happen in the show?" And Eric Bischoff would say, "Well, so and so's going to do this, so and so's going to do that." And Hogan would say that the line that everyone hated. That doesn't work for me, brother. Because he would be like, well, you can't have so and so beat this guy. And Eric Bischoff would be like, why? Because I'm gonna fight him down the line, and if you have wrestler A get beaten by wrestler B, well, when I want to fight wrestler B, who am I beating? So he would change shows on the fly so that his storylines, like months down the line, weren't messed with. Or, like, there was a famous incident where Vince Russo talked about Bash at the Beach 2000. It's the reason Vince Russo eventually had to leave the company for good. Hulk Hogan sued him because what happened is that Vince Russo wrote a storyline segment where Hogan was to lose the belt, and Hogan kept saying, no, I want the belt. I should be champion. And everyone in the booking meeting who, had been there that weekend had said, no, the person walking out with the belt is going to be Booker T. And Vince Russo's big plan was, no matter what happens, Booker T is going to be champion. And he kept sending ideas to Hulk Hogan going, this is how we're going to do it. This is how we're going to do it. And every time, Hogan would come back going, doesn't work for me, brother. Doesn't work for me. And eventually Russo screwed him. They had to. Basically screwed them. But they'd agreed on it. That was the thing. They'd actually agreed that Russo would screw me. Russo actually said, look, I'll screw you out the belt. I'll have Jeff Jarrett go down, lie down in the ring. He's the champion. He lies down the ring. You don't even throw one punch. He lies down the ring. You cover him 1, 2, 3. I hand you the belt. You walk out. Then what happens is you come in, you leave with the belt. I'll book a match later on that night where I'll say, Hogan's not the champion. I think Jeff Jarrett's still the champion. Gonna have Booker T and Jeff Jarrett for the title. And Hogan's like, okay. And Vince Russo says to him, so what you can do is you can take 6 months off and you consider yourself the champion. and you can come back in 6 months' time with your belt and fight who the champion is at that point for their belt. And Russo thought it was a good idea, and Hogan thought it was a good idea, because Hogan was like, I can go back in 6 months and go straight to the top again, because the one thing he always wanted, top of the card. Didn't matter that he was too old, he should always be the main event. So, you know, he thought that was a great idea, they agreed on it. However, Vince Russo went out and cut a promo on Hogan, calling him every name under the sun. And Hogan saw that as defamation of character and sued him. So Russo eventually fired because of that. But be that as it may, he's the main reason WCW is not alive anymore. And this book, The Death of WCW, I honestly, fascinating reading. But what I've also been doing is there's a wrestling reviewer by the name of Thomas Hall. And I found some books he wrote, and I'm going to buy them off of Amazon, because I got a trial off Amazon and read some of them.
You think we're all just waiting?
So, you know, Thomas Hall took it upon himself to watch every episode of Nitro and every WCW pay-per-view from Nitro episode 1 all the way up to WCW closing. And what he did is he watched every episode of Nitro, every episode of WCW Thunder, which is his second show, the Thursday show they came up with, and he reviewed it.
My hatred is too low.
And it's incredible to read, because what you're reading, and I think I said it to Edward best, you're reading a man's descent into madness, because he is reading storylines that don't make any sense fizzling out, decisions that don't make any sense, and he's trying to piece it all together from week to week, going, what is going on? You know, he's like, what is happening here? Why is this? Why did that happen? And he's questioning it every step of the way. It's incredible. And I've read through most of it. I got up to halfway through the Russo era, and I couldn't read it anymore. I also couldn't find the books for it anymore. But I do intend to buy it. I'm gonna definitely buy that book when it's a two-hander, that's why. But this. So I'm gonna buy all those books, the kind of all the Nitro and Thunder reviews, because I think it'd be fascinating reading. I mean, if you own the WWE Network, you can watch all those episodes again. Don't know if I could do that. Don't know if I could. I have some fascination with WCW, but I don't know if I could go back and watch. I don't know if I could watch all that stuff, because from what I hear, even though it's, you know, it's one of those things where you're like, you can't believe it's happening, it's tough to watch. It's because Vince Russo was brought into WCW to bring the ratings up. He got the WWE up as high as it could go in ratings wise, so he decided a new challenge would be WCW, but he couldn't do it. He tried to create the Attitude Era in WCW and it didn't work. And also as well, the Attitude Era wasn't written by Vince Russo. It was created by his wacky storylines, which arguably aren't great. I think the true Attitude Era, the Attitude Era that I know, begins when he left. And I think, you know, he left the company, and I was like, I didn't care. I was like, oh well, he's gone. And it didn't strike me as, you know, anything bad had happened, because I didn't know who Vince Russo was. Couldn't care less when I started watching it. He had left, and WWE was finding its feet again with you know, just with what they had no writer, so they kind of had to find their feet and go, right, well, with no writer, we're gonna have to do this on our own. And they brought in another writer, a guy by the name of Chris Kresge, and he fashioned the Attitude Era that I know, the good stuff, the stuff that isn't just weird and out there. He, created like the Attitude Era that I know, where Triple H becomes, a power player in the sense that he marries Stephanie McMahon storyline wise. Later on he married her for real. And I think that's the Attitude Era that I know, where The Rock's there and everyone else is there. So, it's fascinating, like, when you think about it, that this company, they should have been around longer, and they just couldn't do it. I highly recommend, if you've even got a passing interest in wrestling, this book is just, it's a must read. It's insane when you read, like, week to week, like, how storylines develop and the petty reasons that storylines die on their backside. Like a storyline that, fans are starting to get behind, but they're getting behind the wrong person in the storyline. So, like, some person's supposed to be bad guy and some other guy's supposed to be good guy, but the fans are cheering the bad guy. So, you know what? They take both of them off TV because it's like you're not following the storyline the way you want it to be. They did that with Austin, and they just went, no, you know what? Fans are cheering Austin, let them cheer Austin. He was supposed to be a heel, and Bret Hart was supposed to be a face, and the fans turned them both. So, it's like cutting your nose off to spite your face. But anyway, so that's what really brought me out of my funk, was reading Mankind's book and then reading this book, Death of WCW. It really reignited a kind of passion in me for wrestling, mainly because I've been watching some older stuff and going back and really enjoying it, because it's I don't like the stuff now because there's too much of it. Raw is a 3-hour show, well, 2.5 hours, because you cut out the adverts, and the only way I can watch Raw is if I get the network and watch it 3 or like a month behind, or download it off the internet, and you've got a 2.5 hour wrestling show with stuff I'm not interested in, and then you've got SmackDown, and that's so you're talking 5.5 hours of wrestling that they want you to watch, and a lot of it isn't stuff I'm interested in. I could care less about Roman Reigns, I could care less about, like, Rusev, I could care less about those guys, but those are the guys that are at the top. So I watch the old stuff. I'll, like, listen to the Lapsed Fan podcast, go back and watch old pay-per-views. I'll watch NXT, which is, if you're an old school wrestling fan like I am, like the old Attitude Era stuff, because it was short, NXT's for you because it's an hour, which can't translate to like a proper hour because it's on the network. NXT is just straight up wrestling, and the storylines that they create develop in the ring. There's none of the, like, 45-minute promos of Triple H talking in the ring, and it's, if someone cuts a promo, it's 2 minutes, it's quick, they're out, they define their character and they get out of there. So NXT is one of the best things that WWE have ever done, because it gets good wrestling, fascinating wrestling, and it's over in an hour. And that's the best thing about it, it's over in an hour. You've watched an hour of wrestling, you've seen some really good stuff, they've showcased some good stars, and you know what? Every week it's different. Every single week. Because maybe one week it'll be these two fighting, the next week it'll be these two people fighting, and a storyline will develop, and it'll take months to play out, because NXT's got pay-per-views, but I think they're every like 3 or 4 months, so the storylines have time to develop, and they're interesting, and it's well paced, and it's a developmental territory for a reason. And it works as a developmental territory for the reason for that very reason, because it's developmental. These guys are learning. They're learning their craft. They're learning what's going to make them popular when they get up to the main roster. And some of them are popular before they get to the main roster and just need to ascend. Like, oh, this guy's talking. Like, a wrestler by the name of Finn Balor he wrestled under the name Prince Devitt. Irish dude, and always dressed up and like face paint on, and always had a really unique presence. So he was always really like, he went to NXT and instantly was like a top guy. He won their title, ascended out of NXT, went straight to the top of WWE, was the first person to hold the Universal title, and due to Seth, I'm gonna hurt everyone I can, Rollins, injured on the shelf. And he will come back and it will be awesome, but you know, it's fascinating. It's fascinating that this guy who was in developmental, all of a sudden, top of the card, because of the time he was given in NXT to show people who didn't know who Prince Devitt was, who this guy was, and why they should watch him. And then they ascended to the main event, and the fans loved him. But anyway, I've talked too long. I'm gonna end the video here. When we do the next Diablo Sunday, probably 2 weeks from now, probably gonna be, we're getting to near the end of this act, so it looks like we're gonna be wrapping Act 3 up very soon, and then we'll be heading into Act 4. So, and then we'll have the DLC, which is Act 5, and then we'll be in adventure mode. But yeah, so thanks for listening to my babble on about wrestling. But it did bring me out of my funk, so that's why you can tell I can get passionate about it, because I know a lot about it, but that's because that's important. In my head, it's stacked and important to me, so I just remember these things and analyse these things in my head, and you know, that type of thing. But anyway, my name is Space Cowboy, and I'll see you next time.